Across the U.S., about 2.5 million children are being raised by their grandparents, other relatives, or close family friends. These caregivers step up when parents are unable to raise their children, forming families known as kinship families or grandfamilies. Now, while the challenges some of these families face are similar to parent-headed families, there are fundamental differences. Unlike parents, who have automatic legal rights and responsibilities for their children, kin caregivers do not. They also did not expect to raise these children. They often step up to raise them at a moment's notice and during a crisis, like a parent's death. As of that moment, caregivers need authority to make decisions for the child, like enrolling them in school, and often need a court to grant a legal relationship, all of which takes time and money. Even with a legal relationship, the practical issues can be overwhelming. Like, where will the child sleep? Grandma may live in adult-only senior housing. Despite these challenges, decades of research prove that children thrive with kin. Generations United has been working on behalf of these families for over 25 years. As part of our work, and guided by kin caregivers and other experts, we run the only federally funded National Technical Assistance Center on the families, the Grandfamilies and Kinship Support Network. If you work at a government agency, school, or small or large nonprofit organization, we're here to help you better support the families. Visit www.gksnetwork.org to learn more.
Donna, Executive Director of Generations United. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to the Grandfamilies and Kinship Support Network for that fabulous new video. Generations United's mission is to improve the lives of children, youth, and older people through intergenerational collaboration, public policies, and programs for the enduring benefit of all. We are the home of the National Center on Grandfamilies and the Grandfamilies and Kinship Support Network, a national technical assistance center. Thank you for joining us today as we release our 11th annual State of Grandfamilies and Kinship Care Report, Pathways to Success, K-12 Education Supporting Kinship and Grandfamilies. Please join the conversation about the report on social media using the hashtag 2024 Grandfamilies Kinship. The goal of our reports is to have an annual accurate picture of the families where grandparents, other relatives, and close family friends are raising children, and to take a deep dive into the issues that are impacting their lives. Among other topics, in the past, we've focused on mental health, food and nutrition, housing, immigration, and the opioid epidemic. The report has had an incredible reach and resulted in public policy and practice changes that better support children and caregivers in grandfamilies. We're grateful that today's release of our new report on education was made possible in part from support from the Centene Corporation. The report's topic, education, is dear to my heart. I remember being on a site visit in LA more than 20 years ago when a grandmother looked at me and said, "I realized this is the first time my granddaughter has started and ended the school year in the same school, and she's in the 6th grade." We know grandparents and other relatives provide the roots, stability, and love to help children succeed. Today's report was informed by education experts, caregivers, and young people in grandfamilies, as well as by national organizations. We thank them for their invaluable input. This report and event wouldn't be possible without the skilled, committed leadership of Jamal Clark, Assistant Director of our National Center on Grandfamilies. Thanks, Jamal. And many thanks, not just to Jamal, but to the entire talented GU team for your work bringing this to fruition. This is one of the most incredible teams that I know of, and I am so proud and grateful to each one of them. Our commitment at Generations United is to lead with the voices of those with lived experience. So to center us as we begin, we're pleased to share this video created in partnership with Humana Foundation, highlighting the experience of one grand family.
I have 4 beautiful boys, Cedric, who's 10, a set of twins, Sage and Samir, who are 7, and Sadie Bud, who's 3. I was blessed with them about 2.5 years ago when their mother passed. From there, it's been a roller coaster, up and down, up and down. My name is Sherry Losh, and I am soon to be retired teacher of 36 years. I'm retiring now because I have been blessed with the duty of taking care of 4 grandsons. Each one has their own individualized way of doing things. I do have my village. I do have my family. I do have friends. I can call my brother. I can call my niece. I can call someone and say, I need a break, and I get it. So it's a heavy burden, but it's a light one at the same time. It gives you a sense of purpose. It gives me something to live for even more so. It's not impossible. It's a challenge, but it's a blessing. I know what to avoid now that I have my 4 grandsons and mistakes not to make, and what I could do better with these 4 boys that I didn't have the opportunity to do with my 2 kids. The good thing about it is they love vegetables, they love fruit, they eat fruits and vegetables every day. I make sure they have that, but it's a lot. It's a lot feeding 4 boys. When you start to think about what you have in front of you with 4 little boys and wanting to keep them safe, it's a lot when I start thinking about that. But my sanity stays focused because I have to stay focused on those 4 boys to make sure I stay healthy, that I stay well mentally, emotionally, and physically. And they keep me at all 3 levels to stay that way. Sadie, I think, will be going into the service. Sage, I could see him doing social work. Cedric, I could see him in college. And Samir, I could see him maybe being a principal. Want to tell everybody else what to do. I see myself just being healthy and enjoying my grandkids. And my son, hopefully having granddaughters. I don't hesitate to say it's by the grace of God. It's my faith in God that I make it through the day, because I do need that inner strength, my faith to make it with these boys. And it's not that the boys are more than I can handle. It's just that time is short, it seems, and I don't have enough time in a day to address every need that I need to get to with the boys. Sometimes I just have to stop and just breathe. That's how I manage with the boys.
Thank you to Miss Sherry Marsh for sharing her family story and the incredible job she's doing raising her grandsons. Every grand family across the country is unique. Yet, like other kinship families, Ms. Larch faces a host of challenges. Our report uncovered 3 key themes about the nearly 2.5 million children being raised in grand families. First, grandfamily caregivers face overwhelming barriers supporting the education of the children in their care. Despite this, their strength, resilience, determination, and the power of family connection makes their home the best place for children who can't remain with their parents. Children in kinship care have better academic outcomes than children raised in foster care with non-kin. And when grandfamilies get access to critical supports, the children's academic outcomes can soar. But the path to getting that support is fraught with roadblocks. Despite providing full-time care for the children, grandparents and other relatives often lack a formal legal relationship to the children. They cannot check the legal guardian box on the school forms. By raising the children, most kinship caregivers have kept them out of the foster care system. In fact, for every one child being raised by relatives in the foster care system, 19 are raised by relatives outside the foster care system. But caregivers who are not licensed foster parents don't have access to foster care payments or a caseworker or help to navigate the legal issues and connections that can help them access support. Instead, these kinship families often aren't legal guardians or foster parents. Through no fault of their own, they fall in a gray area, which leaves them facing unique, systematic hurdles to everything from enrolling the children in school to participating in planning of the children's education. Too often, they aren't included in communications about the child's progress or needs. They aren't invited to conferences or individual education plan meetings. They're not given information about available resources to help their child, like tutoring or wraparound services. And these services are important because most of the children who come into care of relatives have experienced significant trauma that can affect their learning. On top of this, many grandfamilies may be struggling to meet the basic needs of the child, who they took in unexpectedly. Some grandfamilies report making decisions to forego their own medication in order to ensure they can get food on the table and school clothes for the children. Yet we know grandfamily caregivers fight for the children they're raising. And when the families get the support they need, the children thrive. Listen to the words of Keontae from Washington, D.C., raised by his grandmother. "There is nothing I can do to repay my grandma for everything. She is the backbone of the whole family. She has been on my team 100% every step of the way, learning about therapists, schools that help me with my ADHD and anger issues, and getting my 504 plan. She has been very supportive and trying to encourage me. And this support has paid off. This fall, Keontae headed off to college at the University of Alaska. So cheers to Keontae and to his grandma, Constance." Our report outlines a series of key recommendations. These include schools should create and implement plans to regularly share information about available services for grandfamilies during enrollment and through ongoing outreach. States should enact educational consent laws to ensure kin caregivers are able to enroll the children they're raising in school and participate in educational decision-making. Congress should support the expansion and sustained funding of kinship navigator programs, though they connect caregivers to supports and services that they need. And the navigator program should build strong relationships with schools. Title I schools, those with high poverty rates, should engage grandfamilies in education decision-making processes about how federal and local funding should be used to support tailored services. Schools should be positioned as central hubs of providing wraparound services, ensuring all children, including those in grandfamilies, arrive at school prepared to learn and thrive. Congress should continue investment in the Grandfamilies and Kinship Support Network, the National Technical Assistance Center that helps improve cross-system collaboration to support grandfamilies. Now I'm delighted to turn the program over to our outstanding panel, where you'll hear directly from caregivers and school leaders about the importance of engaging kinship families in education. It's my pleasure to introduce Jason B. Allen. Jason is the National Director of Partnerships for the National Parents Union, with 19 years of experience in education as a teacher, administrator, and leader. He's also a storyteller, advocate, podcaster, and blogger. His work, centered on his family's foundation, Lily's Foundation, supports grandparents and caretakers raising school-age children. Jason will be moderating our panel discussion today. Jason, welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I would love to thank our partner, Generations United, for having me as the moderator for this amazing event that will provide information, resources, and most importantly, testimony to the impactful work being done to support children being raised by grandfamilies and kinship families. Now, I have to say this. I'm representing the National Parents Union, and we are a supporter and champion for grandfamilies and kinship families. We want to make sure that we're supporting all of the many organizations such as Generations United across the nation doing this phenomenal work. I would be remiss if I did not say this before going right into our panel discussion. I would love to give a huge birthday shout out to our 2024 Grandparent of the Year, Miss Murray Brown, who will be 85 in just a few days. And she is the oldest grandparent within our foundation. I want to send her many, many birthday wishes and, of course, many blessings for being a caretaker and a great grandparent who is raising her great granddaughter who is graduating this year. As we are moving into our panel discussion, we will have time to have a brief Q&A from the audience at the end of the panel. Feel free to drop questions in the Q&A box. I encourage everyone to go ahead and do that now before we get into the conversation that will be very exciting and have lots of information that may cause you to forget what you are setting out to ask. We have three extraordinary individuals who are going to bring forth a wealth of experience and insight. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing these phenomenal panelists. First and foremost, our friend Laurie Tapozada, who is a grandmother raising her 9-year-old grandson and her 7-year-old granddaughter. She is a dedicated advocate for kinship families, and she serves as a Generations United Grand Voice caregiver advocate. She resides in Rhode Island. After spending over a year in isolation without knowing any other families like hers, Laurie was able to get connected with a community organization that transformed her experience. So major shout out to community organizations and organizers who are helping to drive this work. This inspired her to help redesign the kinship training programs and establish a peer mentor program with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. She now supports kinship families through the Village for Rhode Island Foster and Adoptive Families. All right, up next, we have Victoria Gray, a Generations United Grand Voice caregiver advocate from Arizona. She is a devoted kinship care advocate, and she has devoted her life to supporting kinship families. She and her husband have raised 7 grandchildren, including those with severe special needs, and she has navigated the challenges with other families that have faced these situations. Since 1992, Victoria has led efforts to secure resources for grandfamilies, including Arizona's TANF program. As the founder of Gray Nickel Incorporated, she continues to advocate for kinship families, earning recognition for her impactful work. We have some heavy hitters on the panel on today. Finally, Dr. Michael Robar, who is now in the 8th year as superintendent of the Osborn School District, brings over 31 years of dedication to elementary education. His transformative leadership as a principal has helped achieve A rating and also a A+ School of Excellence status and designation, which is not easy to get. So please, let's give him a round of applause for that. Dr. Robert has also advanced degrees in multicultural and Montessori education, as well as educational administration. He and his wife reside in Phoenix, where their 4 children have benefited from the same schools that he is dedicated to improving. Now, I am thrilled to moderate this important conversation around grandfamilies and kinship families impacted by educational challenges and how we can improve their school support and services. I hope that you all are ready for the conversation. And Dr. Robert, we see you are ready. We are going to open up and start with you. Please tell us about when you first met Victoria and became aware of her family.
So this is my 18th year as an educational leader, 31 years in education, and I got a chance to meet Miss Gray and her family when I was a brand new principal. I was a 34-year-old baby principal, but I also was a dad at the time. I had a 6, a 4, and a 2-year-old, and so I came into running this amazing school. It was a K-3 school. Where do you ever find that? What an amazing environment to get to lead. And I had children of that same age. So I was prepared not only for being there as a principal and leading these grades that I love teaching, but also as a co-parent along with all the other families that I was going to be working with. One thing that I didn't necessarily have experience with was working with kinship families. I was ready for families that look just like my family, right? And so I had a chance to meet Miss Gray and her children and many other children as a principal, and realized how different things can be and how much I needed to evolve as a leader. I wasn't ready for it at the beginning.
I appreciate your honesty and being very candid about that experience. I can tell you as a former school leader, I believe that we have all been there, and we need more school leaders who can be open and honest about maybe not having everything in the forefront of their careers to support caretakers and grand families, which now you're doing an exceptional job leading the way for others to get connected to doing the same things. Victoria, as a caregiver, what were some of the most effective ways that Dr. Robert and his team built trust and also maintain open lines of communication with you?
Well, one of the first things is they were open. When you went to the school, it was a warm environment. You felt welcome. You know, a lot of parents, the grandparents that I talked to feel like they go to the school and people don't want to be bothered. It was not the case when I went to Osborn School District. And I met with Dr. Roberts because I also had children that had some behavior issues. And so it was just a wonderful atmosphere, a wonderful setting. And the team there was awesome. There wasn't anything that I couldn't go to them and talk to them about or open for suggestions. They even took suggestions from me on what we needed to do. And that makes you feel very welcome and open.
That is so important. It touches to the family engagement standards that we know not all of our school districts are following. But if they do, they can do the very things that Victoria was speaking to us about, and why grandfamilies and kinship families need to feel that trust from their school leaders and also their teachers. So if you have not looked up family and community engagement standards, let's go ahead and do that right now as we're connected to this conversation, so we can ensure that we are serving grandfamilies and kinship families better. Laurie, I would love if you could tell us briefly about your family and what challenges you have witnessed and faced from other caregivers, your personal experience with educational support for children, and really maybe hone in on what challenges are unique to kinship families versus parent-headed families.
Okay, so hi everybody. I am a kinship grandmother, and I started that journey 9 years ago with the call that changed my life totally, asking me to take in my grandson. And fast forward 9 years later, he's 9, he's adopted, and we kind of settled into a groove. But this past summer, I went to Georgia to retrieve my granddaughter because I knew, she was having some tough times, to bring her here for a summer vacation that I was going to be, this is going to be fun. and then got the call, different call this time, asking me to keep her. So I'm raising the two of them. And as far as educational challenges, I know from my work with a lot of families that I have been pretty lucky myself, um, because my biggest challenges were related to the same challenges other parents have, like getting the supports in place for my grandson who has ADHD, and he also obviously has experienced trauma. And I was lucky the social worker was educated in trauma, had experience in trauma, and that person really helped me through that process of getting the 504. I know from my other families, it's sometimes a nightmare. You're sometimes denied. You sometimes can't get to first base with it. It's rough. Now, with my granddaughter, this is a whole new journey because, okay, I have my granddaughter. So I went to register her at school. They told me, no can do, not registering her. Why? Because I don't have legal status. Just exactly what Donna was talking about. And no matter what I would say, they didn't want to hear it. I couldn't get her a physical, get her to the doctor. I couldn't do anything. But when I got to probate court to initiate the guardianship process, turned out there was a state statute that gave children the right, if they're living with relatives and the parent not present, to be enrolled in that school district. So that's how I got her in. And then the day before school started, they called me to say, guess what? She can't come to school tomorrow because we don't have a physical on file, and yeah, can't do it. So I marched over there. I had a huge kinship grandmother fit, and she is now attending school as we're going through, this process. But if you don't have that legal status, you're blocked in so many ways, and from my other families and partly from me too. And I think Donna mentioned already, communication is a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge, especially if a parent is still kind of involved, then there's just a mess sometimes with who to talk to. Are they talking to the parents? Is the parent the one going to the meetings? Is the parent not showing up? All that stuff. And for some of our older caregivers, like I know I'm an older caregiver, but I can at least use a computer and stuff. But some of our older caregivers, they don't. In a lot of schools these days, I can only talk about my area, all schools these days, they use like technology platforms to communicate to the parents. And so if you're not on that program, you are lost. And I know that because at one point last year, they cleaned out the data in their system and I suddenly couldn't access it anymore. And it turned out they stripped me out because I wasn't listed as the parent. So that was interesting. But there are a lot of technology challenges, communication challenges, being respected challenges, like what Victoria described. I so wish every school was like that, but they're not. Like my school, they're nice and everything, but since this all happened with Hazel, they talk to me in hushed voices now because they feel pity for me, and they're like, they talk to me. It's just like, oh my God, just be normal. Kinship is normal.
It
But
is normal, and your experiences are not just unique to where you are located, but they are happening all across the nation. And so I thank you for sharing that. And also, again, highlighting the importance of connecting our grandfamilies and our kinship families, with communication, which all families and parents are concerned about still across the nation. Educators, teachers, let's collectively work on improving that. And also the connection to technology. And so I'm curious, Victoria, to hear your experience maybe with navigating the technology aspect in schools and how your school district is supporting grandfamilies with the huge challenge with technology.
So for me, there wasn't a big technology thing because my kids are older. So this was some years back. But currently, I have family. I had a grandmother that called me because she went to the school and they told her she needed to register the child online. And the grandmother told her, I don't know how to work a computer. And she said that they were very frustrated with her and she really felt like she was unwanted and those type of things. So those are the type of things we need to correct. We have grandparents, great grandparents, they're in their 70s and 80s, and computers are very foreign to them. And so when you say you have to register online, they're lost. they would have to rely on the grandchild to put in the information, and then we don't know if they're putting in the right information because we really don't know what's going on. So I was very fortunate at the time that I came into Mr. Roberts' district, Dr. Roberts' district, because they were open, they were willing to help. And it wasn't foreign to them that I said I needed help. And so that was a great thing. But now with technology, you're stuck if you don't know how to work a computer. A lot of grandparents say, I don't even know how to turn it on. And they don't even know what the children are doing on their laptop. But technology has changed a lot, and the grandparents are not up to date with that. So we're just asking in the school system to have a little patience, a little consideration when the grandparent comes in, because it's new to us too. We did not have to go back to school. Our kids are older or grown. And so it was a new challenge for me just to go back there and say, I got these kids, what do I need to do? But thank God for Dr. Robert and Osborn School District for me. It made it a lot easier.
Awesome. I love hearing that. And I know we're going to Dr. Robert right now. And I would love, Dr. Robert, if you could share some of the best practices. We've definitely heard from our stakeholders challenges that grandfamilies and kinship families are facing. And we also know that your district is getting it right, where a lot of our school districts are struggling in this area. So, Dr. Robert, if you could, for a few moments, please share with us some of the successes that you all are seeing throughout your school district with supporting grandfamilies and kinship families.
For sure. There are a couple things that I was prepared to say, but I just want to respond to two things that were brought up. A couple things that we can do. Number one, eliminate barriers that we have set up that don't need to be there. I know we use technology to make things more efficient, but we also have a computer set up in the front office. So if someone comes in to register, if they don't know how to use it, we can get our front office staff to come out there, sit right next to them and help them fill it out. Or even better, here, just fill out our old paper version. We'll input it all into the computer when you're done. So let's eliminate those unnecessary barriers. The second, in terms of Laurie, you mentioned not having the authority, to enroll your kids right away. That's one of the things that we try and work to do, have worked. If the parent is able to get there, sometimes we'll just have a piece of paper right there. Let's write a note right now, giving grandma and grandpa the authority to be able to come in here and make these decisions. We'll fill that out. We've got all of our front office administrative assistants and a few people here at the district that are notaries. Let us make this a lot easier so that we can just get this done so that you can move forward, But other things that I think we can do, I learned a lot. One thing, Miss Gray came in and you don't wait for, with someone like her for being included. She makes herself included because she's there as her child's greatest advocate, right? And so more than anything, I learned so much from her so that I was able to be a better principal to the next grandparent and kinship families that were able to come. And I can honestly say I was able to apply so much of that learning that I got from Vicki to other grandmas that I worked with. And so I think one thing that I can offer as a superintendent is mentorship for my principals that I have now, in providing training on unique challenges that kinship families may face and how to help them navigate the emotional and legal complexities of kinship care. I can work to build community partnerships, collaborating with local organizations that know how to support kinship families. A lot of times we have counseling services, but do we have counseling services that are familiar with working with kinship families? And if we don't, let's go and form that partnership with the folks that do know how to do this work well. And I also think one of the things we can do as a district is celebrate diversity. Well, one of the diversities that we need to recognize is diverse family structures. One of our schools, Vicki, your grandkids' school, Clarendon School, this Friday, a lot of times we have things like bring your parents to school day. This Friday, tomorrow, they are celebrating bring your special person to school day. So using non-exclusionary language that celebrates the diversity of all of our family situations so that everybody recognizes this is my place.
Listen, these are amazing strategies, examples, ways that staff members, educators can be connected and supporting grand families and kinship families efficiently. I love the families being able to come in and support children with reading, with other initiatives that the schools are doing. And I have to say this, tomorrow is Million Fathers March Day. The National Parents Union is partnering with Fathers Incorporated, and grandfathers across the nation are going to be going into schools talking about how it was in their heyday, but also sharing experiences through literacy and picking up books and reading with children. So I love to hear that this is a norm for school districts, inviting grand families and kinship families into conversations, into schools to really connect the dots and bridge the gap with how we are reaching all families. Victoria, I know that we've heard feedback about how you were able to get Dr. Robert and his team, best practices that we see they're using in the district, and that programming is strong. I would love to see if maybe you could talk to us about how you're able to bring in other grand families, other grandparents, other caretakers into the work and helping them to build what Dr. King would say, the beloved community, and bringing all families into the work.
Well, it's kind of hard because a lot of the families, I want to make this clear, a lot of the grand families feel like they can't come and talk. And so a lot of the things that they need to say or express, they keep it within themselves. And I like to talk to a lot of the grand families, like, what's going on? A lot of times they go to the school, like if they're doing the IEP or a 504 meeting, it's very overwhelming because you go in there and there's a psychologist, there's the principal, there's the teacher, there's a disciplinary, and you're there and you assume that with their education, they know what's best. And that's not always true. So I do talk a lot to them about, let's talk about what the child needs. Let's talk about what the state says that the state has to do, the state education program has to do, and get that stuff started so that at least you have an idea of what's going on. And so, and I hate to keep saying this, but my Osborn school district, I was able to talk with Dr. Roberts. He connected me with all of the principals, and I did a short little training on kinship families with the teachers, because there's a lot of things that the teachers don't understand. And so a lot of times it's said that they're with grandma, they're okay. No, the trauma still continues. They're not okay. And when grandma's having trouble, she doesn't know what's going on. And it's simple things. They were at home with the parents. They were eating Cheerios, or they were eating Fruit Loops or whatever. And grandma's eating Raisin Bran. And she don't understand why the child won't eat breakfast. We've got to take a look at the whole thing. The school connection and the grandparent together can make such a tremendous difference in the education for the child.
Now, I hope everyone wrote that formula down. School plus grand families. Grand families could be parents. Grand families could be kinship families. Kinship families could be communities. But the goal is to have schools plus whatever that entity is, parents, grandparents, kinship families, communities. Both of these things added together equals student success. So, Victoria, thank you for that formula. And Laurie, let's go right to you. And I would love, Laurie, if you could hone in on how schools can better support children in kinship care academically. How are we using Title I funds and other programs to support the academic success of children who are in kinship care?
Well, for me, I mean, in Rhode Island, the village, we did outreach to the 39 school districts in Rhode Island, because we have to have 39 because we're so large. But what we discovered from that is that, we can't blame people for things they don't understand. So Victoria was just talking about that. But to me, I really think that we need a nationwide, like awareness effort around what are kinship families, how do they benefit our kids, what needs do they have, why might they not ask you for help. I nominate Dr. Michael to lead that effort because I just really, if I wish every superintendent was like him so much. But I think that that's really critical. We need an awareness campaign. We need to educate people, and doing those trainings, with the staff, the families facing forward. I think that schools need to partner with the community organizations that serve families so that they know what resources are out there. They know where to refer people to. They have those materials in the school that they can, share with the families. Because again, if you don't know what you're facing, none of the school districts could tell me how many kinship families they have. Why? Because many of the registration documents don't include it specifically. It will say, are you a parent or a guardian? And you check off. In my case, my kid was adopted, so check off. That doesn't tell them I'm a kinship family. I'm a parent, So they need to even be able to tell you how many kinship families are in their district. But they don't know. They told me, oh yeah, we have a lot and it's growing all the time. Okay, how many? And if they don't know who the kinship families are, then they can't do any proactive reaching out. Because just like Victoria said, a lot of kinship families hesitate to raise their hands or make a ruckus or ask for anything. Some of us are flying under the radar. But if schools had a way to know who the kinship families are, they could do that, proactive outreach.
I love that.
Yeah.
Proactive outreach is so powerful, especially to the academic piece. You don't know what you don't know, and teachers and educators, school leaders can do a better job of bridging that gap. And also, I am jumping up and down almost. You can't see it, but I'm jumping up and down because I know for a fact every year when the school year begins, we go to our school districts here in the city of Atlanta and we'll say, hey, how many grand families, how many kinship families do you have? And I say I'm jumping up and down because I literally want to run around the room where they say, oh, we have so many. It's growing. But what is the number? Why is no one counting
Why
this
don't
and
you know?
taking account of this? Why don't we know? Now, we know that Dr. Roberts' district knows, but for the other districts across the nation, we need you all to get like Osborn and reach out to Dr. Roberts and really get that right. Now, for all of our panelists, I want to go in a different direction to something that everyone across the world was impacted by, which was the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that we have grandfamilies, kinship families who are on now. Many of the grandparents, great grandparents lost their children in the pandemic from health scares, health reasons, other impacts of the pandemic. We also have kinship families who not only lost their parents, but their siblings and are raising their siblings' children. And so the immediate impact of loss and grief that had happened, not just to children, but also for the grandfamilies, the kinship families that are raising them. I would like for each one of you, from your perspective or whichever way you may want to highlight this, to go into maybe one specific challenge that you personally faced or something that you saw grandfamilies and kinship families facing during remote learning, particularly with caregiver health and also being able to maybe for someone wanting to go into the technology challenges and disconnections.
So I'll start because I like to talk. For me, COVID was really hard. We had 7 children here in the house. And so we did not have 7 computers for them to complete their schoolwork and things. We got fortunate because then they allowed each of the children, they were given computers so that they could do their homework. But it was stressful for me because when they're in school, it was my downtime. It was that time that I could take a breather. It wasn't doing homework, doing hair, cooking food, doing laundry. It was just a breather time. And so COVID affected us a lot because the children would get into fights, it seemed, because they weren't used to being around each other all day long. So it was a little, I would say COVID affected me in a way of the children being home. because I didn't get to peace or the rest that I would usually get when they were in school. They did pretty well during COVID. One of the children was graduating from high school, and we didn't get to have a graduation ceremony, and so that put stress on him because he felt like everybody else had a service and he didn't. We had to drive by and they handed it to him in the window of the car because of COVID you couldn't have it. But the good thing is that we were together, and that always meant a lot to me. And I thought about COVID and them being outside of the home, how that would have really affected them. But we did get through the school, we got through the computer issue, we got through the fighting, and once the schools were open, I got back to getting some rest.
I'm glad
So
you were
that
able
issue
to
of
get
the
some rest.
schools, that issue of, when the schools finally open, I can say here in Osborn, we stayed closed for longer than when you look nationally, how soon people came back. But we made very conscious decisions. I know that 2020 vision, looking backwards is, amazing. But in the real time, if I were given the situation again and the statistics that I was looking at, I'd do the same thing. Because when we looked and examined the zip codes in our school district, they were the reddest, and red on those maps showed high infection. And, we know not only do we have kinship families, but we have intergenerational families. And we did not want our schools to be a place where that was a spread of the virus that was going to affect families in that way. It's funny, right before, not funny, there's nothing humorous about the situation, but when I look at right before the pandemic, we had just bought computers and gone one-to-one within our district so that every kid could have a laptop here within the schools. We weren't sending them home. And then the pandemic hit, and within 4 days, we had mobilized on how to get every single one of those. So we actually learned a lot about what we're capable of in a time of strife. And I think that we've come a long way and can never close that door. We're not going backwards now. We have this ability to reach back and forth. One of the questions in the Q&A in the chat box was about the difficulty with technology, and we should be doing better. We have the ability with the technology to get it out there. You should have the abilities. We have the ability now to connect families with Wi-Fi. If you can't navigate that on your own, your school should have the ability now in a way we never had before to help families to connect. And to be able to come in and learn how to do it. So schools have to do a better job of recognizing we're not just teaching kids, we're teaching communities. So, doing all those things necessary so that everybody's able to be a partner in education.
Awesome. Laurie, we'll hear from you and then we'll see if we can get some questions in from the audience.
Okay. Yeah, I still have PTSD from that time for sure, because I was lucky enough that I was working and I was able to work from home. However, EJ was only 5 at the time and he has like major ADHD. So trying to get him to focus on the computer for his schoolwork, with the teacher, they did all that. It was unbearable. And if I wasn't like over his shoulder like this, and even if I was, he'd be like, he wouldn't even do it. And I still had to work. I have a memory from that time of I was delivering a training to kinship caregivers. And he, of course, was just doing his own thing. And I can't stop or anything because I'm the trainer. And I had him literally, he climbed up on the table right in front of me, like, behind my screen. And he was twirling and twirling and twirling and like dancing. And I was just like, okay, I can keep going. I don't have to, acknowledge that this is happening. But he missed school entirely that entire time. And I'm going to be honest, I gave up trying to, to juggle everything. I was like, I'll worry about this some other time. And I know plenty of other kinship families where it's the same thing. It was too much. It was too much. And sometimes what they're teaching these days too, not for him, but for people with older kids, like, what are they talking about? Just Hazel had homework in the 2nd grade. And I was like, what? So I gave up. He did not get any education for that period of time. So
I'm so glad that you shared that, Laurie. Honestly, you are absolutely right. So many families, experienced that, and I often tell people as a teacher during the pandemic, I by trade special education, and my students were on time, they were connected. However, everyone isn't Professor JBA, and I had to realize that where I was thinking that teachers were going to be innovative and they would have resources and they would think how to connect to families and who has grandparents raising them and who is in kinship families, who has had death in the family. I had to realize and accept that a lot of educators and teachers, unfortunately, are not trained in the science of reading, nor are they trained in family and community engagement standards. So if you are a family that can relate to what Laurie went through, this is what I'm challenging you all to do before we go into Q&A. Hold your school districts accountable. Ask the question, are you all training teachers in the science of reading? Are you training them in family and community engagement standards so we can ensure that they're not only reaching every child, but they're reaching every family? So that's one of our call to actions. I want to thank our panelists for sharing these powerful stories, these experiences. We now have a few moments for audience questions, and after this segment, there will be a Q&A segment that I believe they are providing information to those who have registered for this event. If you have questions that you are typing into the Q&A box, we will do our best to make sure that we answer those. And I believe we have a couple. And I will go to one question that I see open. And again, Victoria, Laurie, Dr. Roberts, whoever feels led to answer these, please do so. Michael, we'll go to your question first. And I see it says, how can we give grandparents and kinship caregivers the skills to detect the signals when their kids are having thoughts about suicide and how to talk to them about it? And this is a phenomenal question, especially as we are in Suicide Prevention Month. So, Dr. Roberts, I don't know if you want to take off with that question first, but if you have any resources, please feel free to open us up.
Well, in terms of being able to give those look-fors, I cannot step into that world of mental health provider. That's not something that I do, and I don't want to misspeak on that. What I will say that my job as a superintendent is looking at resource allocation and making sure that we have the resources within our district so that I don't speak to it, but we do have professionals that are able to. So if you're, talking about working with your schools, I would look to who they have that are able to provide those. The last thing I want is misguided information coming out of a webinar from me. But one thing that we did to make sure, we have a school safety grants that a lot of times school districts use for, school resource officers. We didn't apply for officers. We applied for social workers to make sure that we're able to connect with children and with families in more ways. So, that's one of the things that we're trying to do to make sure that we're able to do those risk assessments, connect with families immediately when we notice those signs, and have the trained professionals speaking with you about those things in ways that you can be helpful.
That is such a phenomenal answer. And I want to add something very quickly to this question and the work that the National Parents Union is doing, helping our school leaders and superintendents to look at ways to redirect funds. I know that grandfamilies and kinship families are equally concerned about school shootings, and also hearing that school resource officers are not able to be in all places of the building if we don't have enough of them. So being able to separate school safety and supporting SROs and making sure we have the adequate number of them, and also using a large portion of that money for mental health resources. What I know grandfamilies are telling us is that why don't we have a guidance counselor for every grade level, especially when we know that mental health issues, suicide reports are coming in as early as fourth grade? How do we begin to have guidance counselors, more social workers, more of the social emotional intelligence support team members in schools that we need? Again, grandfamilies, parents, caretakers, these are questions that you can take back to your school districts and ask your school board members. How are they helping to set budgets around these things so that superintendents like Dr. Roberts can say, hey, we have the budgets in place. Now we're able to come in and do our job. And Dr. Roberts, again, thank you for breaking down how that works, because the superintendent does not do everything. And I'm glad that he broke down that we have experts that superintendents hire to bring in to help address the mental health issues and concerns of our children. So again, Dr. Roberts, thank you so much for that. Laurie and Victoria, did you have anything that you may want to add around resources you can provide for kinship and grandfamilies concerning mental health, suicide, and other emotional behavior support?
I don't really have the expertise around that question. I mean, we deal with mental health challenges all the time, but I don't feel like I'm the right person to answer that.
Awesome. Okay, let's see if we can go to another question. We talked about suicide prevention and mental health. I want to hone in a little bit on pre-K and early childhood development. We know that changes in family and home dynamics can have a big impact on children, especially as they may be transferring from parents to grandparents to maybe great grandparents or other caretakers. What are resources and support around early childhood education that you're seeing implemented in your schools or school district that are supporting grandfamilies and kinship families?
So in Arizona, they have early intervention for children, and I used it several times for my children because there are a lot of things that goes on that as a grandparent you're unaware of. You know that there's something different. You know that they're not quite talking when they should be or walking when they should be. So that early intervention to get them in is very important. But first of all, you have to be honest with yourself and put your pride aside and go to the school and say, how can you help me? I think there's a problem. And so when you do that, the doors open up and you can start getting help and services that you need.
Yeah, in Rhode Island, we have early intervention too, but honestly, I don't know if it's just my state, but there's really nothing much out there for specified for kinship families. You know, we're working on it.
Awesome. I'm thankful that you guys are giving us honest feedback of what's available, where there's scarcity, so people who may have resources are able to come in and help us with that. I know that Donna has joined us again, and we are getting close to the hour. We had so many comments, so many questions, but we want to thank everyone for your feedback. And most importantly, thank you to our panelists and our special guests on today. I know you all are at home and viewing this virtually, but please, please, please join us in giving our guests a hand. And thank you all for your comments, your questions, your stories that you have provided. At this time, we are going to turn it back over to Donna, who is going to close us out. And again, thank you, thank you, thank you all for being a part of this amazing conversation.
Jason, that was fabulous. Thank you. And a heartfelt thanks to our panelists for sharing your experience and insights today. Most importantly, though, thank you for what you do every day. Dr. Robert, Victoria, Laurie, Jason, it's amazing. You are so inspiring. Thank you. I know many of you have more questions and want to discuss the report. Please stick around for a more in-depth 30-minute Q&A discussion with the Generations United team, the report's author, our dear colleague, Amy Boyer, and our panelists. You won't want to miss this opportunity to dive deeper into the findings. To do this, you'll have to leave this webinar and use a new link to join the interactive Q&A session. We're placing the new link to join in the Q&A in the chat. But now, stay with me just for a minute longer, please. Remember, you can visit our website to download the report and additional new and exciting resources. Coming soon, we'll have an interactive toolkit created by Generations United's Grandfamilies and Kinship Support Network. It will be practical strategies and tools for professionals in the field. Before we go, though, I'm so excited to announce that our next conference will be held June 25th through 27th, 2025 in Louisville, Kentucky. Now in its 23rd year, Generations United's International Conference, co-hosted by Harvard House, will bring together hundreds of professionals, educators, caregivers, advocates, and enthusiasts from around the world. Join us to learn, connect, and share innovative practices and programs on a range of intergenerational topics, including grand families. For the most up-to-date information, visit the conference website. As we close this part of the program, we ask you to join us in sharing our report. But most important, use it to help make a difference for grand families across the country and in your communities. Share it with leaders in your school, policymakers, and other decision makers in your community. In closing, like Dr. Robert, there are school districts, superintendents, and teachers that know about the obstacles grand families face and try to find ways to support them. For example, after one of their over 100 custody court appearances, grandmother Adrienne Charnow accompanied her grandson Joy to a school. It was the middle of the day and school was well underway. When they arrived, Adrienne walked towards the school, expecting to take Joy to the office to explain once again why he was tardy. But the school staff knew the reason he was late, and when Adrienne and Joy opened the door, they were met by a row of teachers and students who applauded and cheered for them when they arrived. Schools can be wonderful, welcoming hubs of information and support for grand families. Let's help them fulfill that potential. It's up to all of us. Now, to keep the conversation going, hop onto the Q&A session. The link is in the chat. And thank you so much for joining us today and for what you do. Thank you.